Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Do you feel stuck, silent, and stressed all the time? Is something hurting your heart and soul? Are you burning yourself out? Then you're in the right place because this is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with inner peace and joy. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Today is going to be a great day because we're going to be talking about something that is really exciting for me. Look, in the last few episodes, we have been talking about this whole idea of how can we take control of our own well-being. And this idea of control is such a wow. I mean, we all have a need to experience a sense of power and control over our own lives. So it's like fundamental to our ability to achieve inner peace and joy and sense of fulfillment and contentment in our lives. It really is. So anything that we need to do to achieve that sense of control is a good thing to do. But when we think about, okay, what is it that I need to do, we can get in trouble because there are all kinds of things that we may think we can control in our lives, but turns out we cannot really control them. And then because we're trying to control something that we cannot really control, oh God, it just causes so much frustration and pain and all that kind of, like suffering. So it's really important that we recognize the difference. Like we have the wisdom around what are the things that we really can and cannot control. So I'm going to be making some claims where I'm going to say, okay, people, here, listen to me. This is something you can control in your life, and this is something that you can't. I'm going to be making some claims like that. Now, last episode, I spent a lot of time, talking to you about how important it is for you to challenge everything that you hear, including hear me say. Okay, so I won't get into that again. But please remember that I need you to challenge what you're hearing, even from me. But don't just challenge it from a place of armchair philosophy. Challenge it with courageous action. Because that's the only way to gain wisdom in our lives. Because wisdom is about the application of knowledge. Wisdom is applied knowledge. All right. So, here is my first claim. The first claim is that you cannot control anybody else. You cannot control anybody else. There's no other person in this world that you can control unless they let you. And I'm saying that, and I'm saying that as a pretty absolute statement. Now, absolute statements are very tricky because if one can think of even one instance where they're not true, then there goes your absolute statement. Hey, it's been proven false. So I'm pretty careful about when I make an absolute statement. Now okay, all right. You got to the philosopher in me. My philosopher in me got to me. Oh God, okay, all right. So I'll make a little tiny little adjustment to that statement. It's still pretty much like what I said, but a scenario popped into my mind. So, oh God. Okay, so let's say, okay, there is somebody like your child, and your child is highly autistic or something like that. You may think, well, I can control my child. Well, actually, at one level, you may be able to control your child. But even in this case, something like this, you cannot control your child, not fully. So the slight amendment that I'm going to make to saying that you cannot control anyone else is, I'm saying that in the context, I'm going to actually bring in another absolute word to amend my absolute statement. And I'm going to say, you can never control another person absolutely unless they let you. You can never control anyone else absolutely unless they let you. So you may be able to control them in certain limited ways, under certain kinds of conditions, but you will never be able to control another person in an absolute way unless they let you. Okay, so now let's start to really challenge that idea. I'm going to help you. I'm telling you, I want you to challenge me on this, right? And I'm so committed to that, is I'm actually going to help you by giving you arguments that I know have popped into my mind in the past when I was still working on reflecting on this idea and taking it in and making it a belief that I have. So before it became a belief in my life, I tested it out. I challenged it because it wasn't always my lived reality. I thought I saw this happening everywhere, that people were controlling other people. So for example, at a very, very personal level, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. When you have survived a trauma like abuse, what's happened? Somebody has violated your boundaries, violated your right to, my God, it's like they're taking control of our body, and maybe even more damaging than taking control of our bodies in that context of abuse can be the control of our mind and our spirits, right? It's like, how does somebody get to control your body? It's generally because they're actually impacting and influencing your mind and making you believe that that they can do what they're doing and that you cannot stop it. Because remember, we're talking about a situation of abuse, an experience of abuse. No one wants to be abused, right? So by definition, this is something that's happening to you that you do not want, that you do not desire. There's no excuse and never an invitation to abuse or rape. No excuse and never an invitation. Never an invitation. Never, never, never an invitation to abuse or rape. Nobody wants to be abused. Nobody wants to get raped. Okay? So, but there are people who are getting abused. There are people who are getting raped. We're living in a world where 1 out of every 3 women and 1 out of every 6 men have experienced some kind of abuse in their lives. And by the way, this abuse that I'm talking about, the statistic, it's related more specifically to sexual abuse, sexual trauma, sexual assault, like all the kinds of abuse, manifestations of abuse with sexual connotations. If you begin to look into the statistics of incorporating even other kinds of abuse, mental, emotional, verbal, physical, oh my God, these numbers will skyrocket. They will skyrocket to, not that the figures of 1 in 3 and 1 in 6 aren't bad enough. But once we count in all the other kinds of abuse, my God, it's like there'll be fewer people who have never experienced abuse than there are people who have. So if there are, in fact, any people in the world who have never experienced abuse, I highly doubt there are any people existing in this world who have never experienced any kind of abuse in their lives. So anyway, so when you're being subjected to something like abuse, your power and control is being taken away from you. No one ever wants to be abused, but they're still being abused. So isn't this a scenario? Isn't this a situation that disproves the claim that I just made, that no one can control another person unless the other person allows them? So it's like, say, so let me again rephrase that in context of my situation, my story, and say that I now believe, and this is true, I do believe that no one can control me now. No one can control me in an absolute way, with that little addendum. No one can control me unless I allow them to control me. Unless I allow them to control me. Okay. So, yeah, and I do believe that now. Okay. So what is that saying? So what? But you just said no one ever wants to be abused. I didn't want to be abused, but I was. But now I'm saying no one can control me unless I want them, unless I allow them. So what are you saying? You didn't want to be abused, but you still allowed yourself to be abused? Well, yeah, kinda. Now, okay, people, this is where a lot of the victim blaming kind of attitudes in our society creep in. Okay, where it's like, no, see, it is her fault that she got abused or raped or whatever because she allowed it. If she hadn't dressed this way, or if she hadn't, gone out and got drunk, or done, like if she wasn't roaming out in dark streets and isolated places, or no. Stop it right there. If you're thinking this way, stop it right there. It's not what we were talking about. Look, there are a lot of situations in which you can be faced with choices in your life, and you make the best choice that you can in that moment. So for example, a lot of the survivors, the victims of abuse and those kinds of trauma, it's true. Both things are true. It's like they didn't want to be abused. All three things are true. They didn't want to be abused. They didn't invite the abuse in the sense of wanting it. It's also true that at some level they allowed it to happen. And it's also true that it's not their fault that they allowed it to happen. They cannot be blamed because they allowed it to happen insofar as they did allow it to happen, because guess what? We're all making the best choices that we can with what we know and what we have. When somebody, like in my case, I froze up, right? When I was being subjected to the abuse, I froze up. I had this reaction where I was so scared, I was so confused about what was going on. My reaction was like, I froze up. Now, you can blame me for that and be like, hey, yeah, like if she had wanted, she could have kicked and shouted and screamed, or, like run away or something like that and gotten out of it. And that's true. But possibly, or maybe not, right? How do you know that if I had put up a fight, if I had screamed out and all those kinds of things, that I might not have gotten in more trouble? In terms of, at least this way, because I froze up and I didn't resist in the moment, I managed to survive through that incident and got out of that alive. But if I had screamed and shouted, maybe it would have prompted my abuser to become violent and hurt me in other ways as well, endangering my life, maybe even taking my life. Who knows? Do you know? Were you in that situation? So the thing is that I made the best choices that I could in that moment with what I knew and what I had. Now, if something like that was to happen again, because I know different things and I have different abilities and different capabilities, I might react in very different ways. So that's one thing, that sometimes you're just forced to give in. By forced, I don't mean forced in an absolute way, but forced in the sense that the alternative that we have is just so much worse or unimaginable for us, or just feels inaccessible to us. And so, as bad as the choices that we make it because we don't have a better choice. This whole idea of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. But if you choose the rock, guess what? You still had the choice. You could have chosen the hard place instead. And if you chose the hard place, you could have still chosen the rock instead of the hard place. You still had a choice. Now, that's one way of thinking. One level at which you can analyze this whole idea of I always have a choice, in terms of like not allowing somebody to control me. But I'm looking at this time. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, stop right here for this episode. I'm going to pick up right here next episode, because this is such an important point. I'm going to go even deeper with you on this idea of the choice we have and what's the nature of the choice, the realities about what it means for us to have choice. Because this is like really, really, really important. So until next episode, remember, please think critically about what I'm saying and challenge me on it, but also challenge yourself on it. Okay, so don't just do armchair philosophy. Go out, take courageous action to get wisdom from life on these points around what I'm talking about. Okay, all right. So connect with me to do that. You know how to do that. Go to my website at www.academyofthriving.com. And from our contact us page, you will see all the different options for how you can connect with me: email, phone, Facebook, Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. I don't think that's on the website. But anyway, you'll have plenty of options. So just go ahead, do that. And then besides that, I just wish you lots of peace and joy.